Let's not waste any more time. Houston is the summit. This time around for the rematch. Nearly 3 years later, UFC 271, the pay-per-view, going down this Saturday night. And what is going down is potentially a historically important, potentially great rematch between two of the top 185-pound fighters in history, two of the best fighters in this era. But Luke Thomas, as we now get through a fun and long week of setting the stage storyline-wise, today is where we earn that check. We do film study, we do X's and O's, we do, what are you, numbers guy? Yeah, sometimes we are. So Luke, let me start the analysis of this great fight that BC's been banging that drum for a while. I want you to answer true or false here to two quick questions, then I'll throw it to you. Is the only person that's going to end up beating Israel Adesanya at middleweight and solving this puzzle someone that's got to be completely well-rounded? Chin, boxing, takedowns, takedown defense, credible submission defense, power, speed, IQ, experience, all that and then some. True or false?
True. I think that is true. I think if you examine...
Then second question, Luke Thomas, and then I'll tee you up with an alley-oop. Whether or not the first fight at UFC 243 was the result of Robert Whittaker's fatigue, mental toughness, all the journey he had to go through or not, isn't true or false Robert Whittaker the most equipped person in the world today at this weight class to potentially do that this Saturday night?
Yes. That is true. That is true. I think what you're spotlighting as what kind of fighter would have to exist to give Adesanya problems, and then when you simply survey the list and who gets closest to that comparison, both in terms of achievement and, again, what the tape shows, Robert Whittaker's your guy. We know this, but it is worth saying out loud, BC. I think Robert Whittaker is not here in any way, shape, or form by accident. It is true that I'm sure the UFC wants to nurture some of their more important relationships between two fighters, right? Guys who are rivals. I'm sure that the UFC has thought long and hard about what they want to do in the Oceanic region with New Zealand and Australia. And I'm sure that that matters to them to some degree in how fights generally get made, but maybe even this one to a degree a little bit. I don't want to say that there's no marketing behind it whatsoever. But even if there was zero marketing, Robert Whittaker is your guy. The guys he beat to get there and how he did it is extremely important. I think it will tell the story, win or lose for Robert Whittaker, of this upcoming fight. And I had just tweeted it, BC, before the show. If you look at his first 9 fights at middleweight, he attempted a total of 5 takedowns. In the 3, that would include the Adesanya loss, which, by the way, he attempted 0. In the 3 fights since then, he has attempted a total of 22. Now, granted, some of that is a little bit skewed because it's 13 against the Brit, Darren Till, excuse me. And some of those were just like, I'm going to use these for strikes. But he doesn't have any other 3-fight campaign, BC, where he attempted at least 1 takedown in each of those 3 fights. This is a new strategy. It's not that he's trying to be Khabib, of course not. But to your point, mixing in the smarts, mixing in all the other skills that he has, really leaning on that Batman-like tool belt around his waist, and the results speak for themselves.
And look, I don't say this to try to be cheeky or start some 30-minute explanation of all the ways Robert Whittaker can and will win and just not remember the result of their first fight or how great Adesanya is. I say it more to celebrate this matchup, but also to say, look, I'm sorry. I've watched the tape a million times, not 49 times, but I've seen enough of the loss for Whittaker against Adesanya at 243 and the subsequent 3-fight win streak from Whittaker. And what I'm here to tell you is we got to throw out that first fight, not throw out the lessons Whittaker can learn, but throw out circumstantially who they were at that moment and just say this rematch has the potential to answer all the questions that we really had that first time that we didn't end up getting there. And again, whether we didn't end up getting there because it was more than 50% that Whittaker was compromised, or whether that's just a narrative or an excuse or a storyline, one thing I think you can agree with by rewatching their first fight, for as well-rounded as Robert Whittaker is, and boy is he brought the wrong game plan into that first fight. He's saying he brought the wrong mindset. He brought the wrong fragility of his body physically. He brought a lot of wrong things in there. But first and foremost, Luke, he brought the wrong strategy to come in there consistently on a straight line. And even though he disguised his attempts offensively very well, his defense was tight for the most part, save for that quick knockdown at the end of the first and obviously the finish. But he's still coming in a straight line, loading up, using a ton of energy and effort. And if you're going up against Israel Adesanya, I'm not here to tell you Adesanya is one-sided, because that suggests that there's only one way he can win a fight, and that's not true. But I am here to tell you, if you're going to walk into the spider web of the dominant skill of what makes somebody so great as Adesanya, at the end of the day, Luke, you're going to deserve the loss you got. And Whittaker, looking back, compromised or not, he's not bringing that same game plan into this rematch. And I think the last 3 fights prepared him perfectly for the plan that he will end up bringing in, which is obviously going to look a lot more well-rounded to match his skill set.
I think that is absolutely correct. To me, when I think about why this rematch is so important and what to anticipate, I rewatched the first fight, as I'm sure you did, and it's just not a great strategic approach from Robert Whittaker. In some ways, very uncharacteristic for him in that sense, especially when you compare that to the 3 subsequent fights where he did really retool things. But so the first thing I would say is I am in complete agreement. Here's the biggest lesson from that first fight for me. It's that I'm sure his mindset wasn't great. The strategy wasn't great. But I do think it is worth at least pointing out, if Whittaker tries to just have a striking match with Adesanya again, I don't think he can win that. Frankly, I don't think he can go 5 rounds doing that. Adesanya's just, in terms of pure MMA striking versus Rob's is elite, but Adesanya is the specialist of this all special. So in that level, he can't win. But the lesson, as we've indicated from those 3 fights is, well, geez, A, he's a very good striker, to be absolutely clear, and B, when you begin to put these other pieces of his game together, he is just super formidable in every dimension. When everything is playing off the other thing, it raises the overall level of what he can do to a significant degree. So he has, heading into this second fight, he's got the benefit of learning a lot of important lessons about some of the striking that will work. Obviously, he's going to have to strike a little bit, right? Some of that worked, take that back, bring it in, and then use all the other things he has put into practice. Again, BC, this is not, for example, the second fight with Hughes and GSP, where it's like, I don't really know what Matt Hughes is going to do all that differently. Now, Matt Hughes won the first time, so it's a little bit differently, but you realize that St. Pierre was a little bit mentally overwhelmed the first time and blah, blah, blah. But you're just thinking about the rematch, like, dude, what's he going to do differently this time to get the win? There's a lot of things he not only can do differently, he did them differently in the 3 fights after the loss. This is, if you're a Robert Whittaker fan, I would argue, and he looked great on the scales, by the way, best case scenario heading into a rematch.
Right. Nobody wants to go through like some of the hell he went through physically and mentally, but it's made him better for it because of how Whittaker raised his game in those 3 tests. He had to go 5-round chess match with Darren Till. That really, he got his chin tested a little, but it was more about, you got to carry out a high-level game plan against a guy who is able to control the fight on his terms, and let's credit Till, he at least did that. Then against Cannonier, Luke, we really got to see more of that evolution and saw his chin, saw his perseverance in some of the scares with his front leg getting chopped up, all that. But I think he really needed the Gastelum fight as well. A Cannonier 3 rounds. He needed the most recent one, because I know that Gastelum can rightfully be a polarizing figure in that he raises his game so high and then can look so ordinary at times. But I saw a Gastelum who was dialed in. And I think some of the things that Whittaker had to deal with poise, spacing, timing, all of that, becoming more of a counter striker, were very key preparations for what might happen on Saturday night. Because, again, you come at Adesanya, that's what he wants you to do. That's what a guy like Vettori can only do. That's what a guy like Brunson can only do. And once Brunson was unable to take him down, of course, or, even Vettori did get an early takedown and couldn't do anything with it, then it just becomes, look, Adesanya is going to stay at that back foot and chip away at you until the scales shift, until you become fatigued or you start getting marked up, and then he's going to turn the tables and come forward, and more often than not, he's going to finish you. So just on its surface of what this rematch could look like, how different will it look, I think we're going to see the first time of Whittaker needing to execute a flawless game plan, of course, to beat somebody like Adesanya, but such a well-rounded one, Luke, that I think if you look at the tape study history of Adesanya, if you're Whittaker and team, you will want to take certain pieces of what the very few people who have had success against Adesanya on the feet have done. And I think there's enough there. It's asking a lot of a well-rounded fighter like Whittaker to put off a completely perfect, well-rounded attack. I do think, though, he's equipped for it. And I'm very interested to see, if you're going to ask me, BC, what's the thing you're most interested to see early in round one? Whether Whittaker can establish himself as the counterpuncher and make Izzy come forward like Romero did, whether you want to give him credit for the things he did or not. And Luke, that changed that tenor of the fight. You make Izzy have to chase you or potentially take a risk like he did with the judges. I think that's a starting point for Whittaker to potentially have some success. He's got to land much more than Romero ever even thought of attempting to do. But I think you got to make Izzy come to you, if at all possible, Luke.
Yeah, this is exactly what Blachowicz did. Backed up, waited for Adesanya to get open, shut down all of his leg kicks, which we haven't talked about. We'll talk about that in just a second. And then when he was kind of close to him, you would see these, he would wait for Adesanya to throw, right? And then he would blitz him behind it with a 3-4 punch combination, sometimes ending with a kick and landing it. To me, BC, I think that's really important. I'm going to pair what you said with the leg kicking. What was one of the major reasons? It's so subtle, but when you pay attention to it, think about how many rounds you can go back in, let's say in the Romero fight, in the Blachowicz fight to an extent as well, but even in the second Vettori fight, sometimes when guys are a little bit neutral-ish or not too heavy with their offense, one way Adesanya is able to get rounds in the bag is he goes heavy to the leg kick, the low leg kick. He's very, very good at that and getting out of the way and just kind of scoring with it all the time. It scored a lot in the Whittaker fight for whatever it's worth. Blachowicz, one of the big things he did was from the word go, he was checking everything. He was checking everything he could. Those were not landing very well. And he was kind of waiting for Adesanya to get inside of punching range. And then again, he would blitz on top of it. Those are things I think that Whittaker could do. I don't know how much he's interested in checking because he bounces a little bit. But to your point, in terms of backing up and then being able to score on him in a counterpunching way will be huge. But I do think we should not lose sight of the leg kick. If a guy like Whittaker can either check him, or what I'll be looking for is, does he catch them? It's a way to sort of get that takedown, kind of cheating it a little bit. You don't have to really wrestle so much. You can just catch it. That could be kind of interesting as well.
Because if I'm gonna try to start to build a game plan for Whittaker to make this more competitive, to make this the fight it could be, I want to jump in and say, okay, you got to establish your jab and use it as a weapon, but he's not as big as Blachowicz. And Blachowicz is sneaky with the way that he's got sneaky speed, and also he's very smart in his timing to set up shots. And like you said, he made Izzy kind of have to come after him, and then he was there with that big jab. I'd say Whittaker, the jab's gonna have to be part of it, but man, it really starts and ends with you need Izzy coming at you, because Izzy's plan A is to build that spider web and have you come in. We all know that. It's not that he can't win with plans B or C, but Whittaker can't win unless he takes Adesanya into plan B or C. So look, when you look at the history, again, of people who have had some kind of success, the only thing that, what's his name? Derek Brunson had success on was getting Adesanya to the clinch on the standing. But it was always in an effort to try to take him down, and he was continuously unsuccessful to points that he left himself open off the breaks, because a lot of times his punches were too wide. He didn't have the hand speed and the accuracy. Whittaker getting the fight into a standing position in close, it's not an easy task at all, but it's possible, Luke. How is he going to, short of taking Adesanya down, which would obviously be a huge, hope, but it's something that doesn't happen consistently. How much do you think Whittaker, as the smaller man, though, could have that success if he can get inside on Adesanya and dirty this up a bit? Not to the levels that, let's say, DC was saying on the commentary ahead of their first fight of this has got to be a rough, raw war. But you've got to be able to take away that reach and that timing of Adesanya, and the best way may be through the clinch.
Maybe, but you got to be careful there. I mean, I would say, so the best, we've talked about this before, the best way to take Adesanya down, if you look at the tape, historically speaking, which isn't to say someone else couldn't change this by virtue of ability, but historically, when they press Adesanya to the fence line, and in fact, he'll sometimes invite it a little bit for this reason, he's actually very hard to take down along the fence line. Izzy gives up the takedown when he is removed from that space and he throws in the middle of combination or whatever he's doing and someone gets underneath it. That is the best way to get him, because then he has to wrestle scramble, right, where he'll stop the first takedown, then you chain it together, and then he can do that. By the way, Robert Whittaker can chain takedowns together, so that's something he'll have to pursue. But if you're going to get to the clinch, I would be, again, his coaches will know more than I ever will, but I would, as just an observer from afar, my personal view, BC, is that's a little perilous. I think you can do it, to off-balance him for short bursts, and then you can break and then win on the clinch break. But I think if you're going to do that, you would want to do that almost like you're only assuming a wrestling posture and then only looking for offense on the break. I think if you try, and Rich Franklin talked about this, he thought, oh, you know what? When I went into the clinch with Anderson, the clinch was a strong position for us. I thought we were going to do well, and then Anderson completely annihilated him there. I don't know if it's that same dynamic, but what I would say is in open space, BC, Adesanya is very good in the clinch from offense. His knees are good. His ability to off-balance and turn are good. He's going to be taller than Whittaker, which means he's going to have a natural flow with that position a lot easier. So he can do it, but under very strict conditions.
Romero was able to get into punching range without taking heavy damage, but he overcommitted to defense, but it really was the threat of his strikes. He at least landed that big overhand right on Adesanya in round 1 to set a tone that if you mess with me, the Cobra is going to take you out. I'd like to see some of that from Whittaker, of course, and I know I'm asking a lot of him to really have constant threats and balance it out. But Luke, the one who has had the most success is Kelvin Gastelum. And you go back and you watch the tape, Gastelum's just a different kind of fighter than Whittaker. He's got quicker feet. He's more of a dart in and dart out. And he committed to taking hella damage against Adesanya to have that success. Are there elements, though, of at least the idea of what Gastelum did to have success that you think Whittaker can use? Meaning, look, I'd like the idea of him staying on the outside and making Adesanya chase, but you're going to have to offset that, of course, with running in, with combination attempts. If he can improve his footwork, if he can find angles to do that, anything but a straight line, no matter how well you're disguising it, is going to have to be a possibility and a threat, because as much as you want to slow down the offense here, you're going to have to land big shots. And if Gastelum did one thing great, Luke, he didn't mess around with a jab. It didn't allow Adesanya natural counting opportunities. He got inside with footwork, and he only threw efficiently with heavy power shots that swayed momentum at times. There's some of that for Whittaker if he wants it.
I don't know if I agree with that, candidly.
Okay.
Here's why. Two things that I would point to. I mean, I can't say... I'm skeptical. How about that? I would put it a different way. Who the hell knows, right? I don't know. I thought Ngannou wasn't going to wrestle. I'm totally wrong. So I'll just say, from this position, I'm a little skeptical. And the reason why, BC, is, one, remember, you had a different... I mean, yes, Izzy switches stances, but for a lot of that fight, you had Southpaw versus Orthodox, right? So it's a very unique setup for either guy. They could have particular strengths or weaknesses depending on who they are in that relationship. So that's one. Again, yes, Whittaker can change stances, but in general, they were kind of Orthodox versus Orthodox a lot of the time. The other one thing I would say is, Kelvin Gastelum has, in a lot of other fights, been hit a lot. In fact, in his Whittaker fight, he got hit a lot. In the Izzy fight, though, for whatever reason, again, it could be that open relationship between the stances, but he actually showed in that particular fight, he showed really good head movement. He was able to get in on the slip line and get underneath, so he was able to get inside some of those defenses from Izzy, and then he has, pretty quick hands, pretty good combination work from there. Is that something that a guy like Whittaker excels at? Yeah, I don't really see that as the way that he fights. I don't know that that's a blueprint that I would necessarily say is the most obvious
I think these are blueprints he's got to touch on, because, again, the whole key for Gastelum there, along with the head movement, was the efficiency of shots. You're going to come in jabbing, like Vettori did. You're going to get pieced up. So there's some combination here, Luke, of the threat of the takedown, of working off the break, of doing all this that could give Whittaker this best shot to at least improve his chances. And I think the Gastelum fight for Whittaker, the most recent one, was probably the best showcase of that well-rounded attack. He was on his back foot for a lot of that fight and had success. And obviously he also, in top position, once he took him down, was very successful.
I think that's totally correct. He has peaked to a degree with that Gastelum fight. It was 7 takedowns. He got 4 of them. I mean, he was just in total command, not just of that dimension, but you go back and you watch the tape, the jab, that combo, the jab cross, high kick that he throws, that landed in the first round. I mean, it was a total showcase. But just think about this. It's the same thing that Gastelum discovered in the fight with Adesanya that in terms of the takedowns, Blachowicz did as well. Dude, Adesanya is hard to hit. You can do it, of course, but it's not so easy to land clean on him. When is he going to be most open? He is going to be most open when his punch is extended, right? That's where the space will exist to get underneath for the takedown. And this is what Gastelum discovered. If he could slip past the jab or the cross or whatever he was slipping, now he had all of this space to land punches or whatever he wanted to do as well, attempt takedowns. You got to get Adesanya to here, because if he's looking at you and doing all of whatever the thing he does, yeah, you might hit him, of course, but it's just got to be a lot harder. It's the same thing. You got to get underneath his offense and then or inside of his offense, and from there he is vulnerable.
Yeah, you cannot under any circumstance hang out in the middle area unless you're committing to that high guard and you're going to really go low output. You're still going to get tagged because the speed difference is clear between these two. And Whittaker's fast, obviously. He's really well-rounded across the board. But Luke, on the flip side, and let me bring in the betting odds here as we shift to the Adesanya side of it more permanently, is DraftKings has it minus 290 Adesanya, your betting favorite, plus 230 Whittaker. What type of changes, because they had monster success, Team Adesanya in the first fight. And really, Luke, okay, there was the stinker with Romero. There was the loss to Blachowicz. But even in that Blachowicz loss, look, Adesanya fought well. There was a lot of things to like. It's hard to make the narrative. You can make the narrative Whittaker improved more in that time frame. Okay. But it's hard to make the narrative that Adesanya is still not as dominant or more. And he's certainly, continuously going in the right direction. What type of changes, if any, would behoove them knowing that they're going to get, at the very least, a fresher Robert Whittaker on Saturday?
Well, I think certainly early on, patience. I think if you're Team Adesanya, I'm not saying you want to punt on the rounds, but you might want to give it a look to see what Robert's showing you before you decide exactly what way to do it. Which, by the way, here's another advantage for Rob. I think Rob gets to go in there and set the tone a little bit early if he wants to, right? I'm going to show you and razzle-dazzle you. Not that he's going to just show all his cards at once, but he at least began, he gets to the first move on the chessboard as far as I'm concerned. And that, depending on how things go, between guys this good, the smallest thing can make a difference. And if he can pick up a round or two just by getting in front creatively and putting Adesanya on the back foot because he's waiting, that could have an effect. So I do think he should wait, but obviously not too long. That's the first thing I would say. I think the second thing I would say is, I really believe Adesanya, the strength of his offense, it's not that the leg kicks are the best or the most important thing that he does. But if you take the leg kicks away, it forces him into boxing range. And then he takes a few more risks with what he's doing. They don't always work out. I really, really believe that they should be wary of that and careful and find ways to get the leg kick going. It had an effect in the first fight, BC. You noticed before, whatever the game plan was, we both agree, very suboptimal game plan by Whittaker the first time. But even in that first fight, he's bouncing and bouncing and bouncing. And the leg kicks had an effect. By the second round, he was much more flat-footed. They've got to find a way to get that going. And then obviously, what strikes are you going to throw when you're in the middle of the fence or the space? You're not along the fence line. What strikes are you going to throw to make sure that you can land and deter him, but that he doesn't, use it to get where you've seen Adesanya throw things off balance and then guys get under him. They have got to be very, very disciplined about that. So I'm expecting some body work from Adesanya, jabs to the body, jabbing in general, getting low, keeping his level low so he can be ready to sprawl and everything else he has to do. And if you're Whittaker, obviously taking away that is going to be pretty critical as well.
Luke, I think at least through the first 3 rounds, this is going to be a very slow, one strike at a time, sniper matchup. It's not going to be, as slow as the Romero fight, but I think you're going to see some elements of that because of the stakes, because of the idea that you're neither guy's coming in here with, I don't think, with the threat that they're going in the wrong direction or that they can lay an egg here. I mean, this is going to be high level IQ, which I think both excel at. Again, even in the wrong game plan, Whittaker coming forward in the first fight, he dressed up those attempts very well. The combinations, the Superman punches, all of that. But I don't think you can win a fight against Adesanya if your mindset is you're going to knock him out. I really don't. I like that. That can't work for Whittaker. So, Luke, do you personally think Robert Whittaker can win 5 rounds against him?
Well, really what you're asking is, can he win 3?
That's true. That's a true point.
Yeah, he could. He could. To me, he could do it both with a strong... I should say this. He could do it with a strong performance, but I do think for a 3-round victory over Adesanya, either he's improved even more than I think he has. And by the way, I think he's improved substantially. But I also feel like it would require Adesanya to make tactical and strategic mistakes. Now, it should be noted, we've seen those. We have seen miscalculations from him. No fighter is perfect, including Adesanya. He is not a perfect fighter. He is a tremendous, tremendous talent, but no fighter is perfect. That is a winnable path, but I still think at some point in that scenario, it's hard to say, remember, it's one thing to have an opponent who makes a mistake and then you capitalize. It is quite another to make them make a mistake and then you capitalize. Whittaker, I think, to really win is going to have to make Adesanya make mistakes. And that is very hard to do. But with a more, eclectic game plan in terms of all the offense he offers, that is doable.
He's going to have to outthink him and out-game plan him. And Luke, all due respects and city cuckling jokes aside, you are going up against Eugene Behrman, the master tactician. So that puts a lot of pressure on Team Whittaker. Who are those coaches and how much respect do you have? I don't hear a lot about on this side of the pond or the oceans, at least, that of Whittaker's coaching team. I've forgotten the names of his team. I've looked them up. The wrestling coach he has there is outstanding. They've been featured in a number of like their countdown videos and whatnot. I apologize for not knowing them by name in that way, but certainly that team is, listen, what you can say about both of those teams, and he brought in a recent, according to the countdown, Rob brought in a guy who was a sort of an Australian boxing legend, an older guy, to really help him work on some of his boxing mechanics. Like, dude, and that you saw some of that in, I think, at the Gastelum fight, if I'm not mistaken. But in any case, you have two teams who don't just have high-level strategic thinking. They have a very good relationship between coach and fighter. They trust one another. They listen to one another. They kind of understand what the other one needs. You didn't get a full sense of that in the first fight because Whittaker came in a suboptimal way. I think you're going to get a much keener sense. This, to me, is going to feel a lot more like Volkanovski versus Holloway in terms of how close it ends up getting. Now, who will get the nod, we'll have to see, but you're going to see some of that dynamic. Look, I'm telling you right now, this is going the distance, and I'm telling you that it's going to be a very polarizing score either way because this is going to be a chess match at the highest level. The back foot game from Whittaker against Gastelum really showed that if he wants to commit to being the counter puncher and even pulling an Adesanya and getting offense going backwards at times, it's potentially in play. And again, you mentioned, okay, if you're going to beat Adesanya, you got to make him make a mistake. I think, Luke, if you're looking to knock him out, you got to make him make a mistake, and he doesn't make those mistakes in high pressure situations. I think you need to put him just in his least optimum state of winning a fight. Not situations where he can't win a fight, but if you put the onus on him coming forward, you're going to open up more opportunities to have success if you're Whittaker, if you can pull that off. Now, Luke, there's been a lazy narrative of saying, okay, well, if you're Team Whittaker, you just take the Blachowicz game plan and use that. Look, they are so far different in size. I mean, you saw the face-off at yesterday's press conference. It reminds you how much taller Adesanya is. You take elements in the spirit of it. You got to have the threat of the takedown, but we got to stop with that idea right there. Yeah, we've talked about this a little bit ad nauseum, which is, some of the ways Blachowicz was able to win was when you look at his dominant grappling and you ask what exactly was dominant about it, it was just heavy top pressure, and you could see him literally like pancaking Adesanya to the mat. Whittaker couldn't do that against Gastelum. Now, to be clear, Whittaker did have, we should point this out, BC, Whittaker did have very good top control from half guard. He was able to keep Gastelum down for, I think, several minutes of the first round at a bare minimum. Like he was good at it. But, Whittaker was underneath, Gastelum was underneath moving and was able to eventually get to the top of the fence standing up. We've seen Vettori has a hard time keeping Adesanya down. I'm not saying that Whittaker can't do it for short and potentially impactful bursts, but this ability to pancake a guy like Adesanya, especially, maybe it's just me, I feel like Adesanya's put on a little bit of muscle recently. Not a huge amount, but he looks to me a little bit more filled out than he has recently. I just don't see that as a realistic game plan. Getting a takedown, getting meaningful top control, doing some damage with it, 100%. Pancaking a guy and then riding out the round that way seems terribly unrealistic. No, the threat has to be there because he's going to have to use the threat of a takedown to open up other offensive opportunities, particularly on counters. But
I do have an update, by the way, if you care about this card. The main event guys made weight. They both looked incredible on the scales, but the fight between Schnell and Alex Perez is off. Perez missed weight, and Schnell refused the fight. So that one is off.
It's like, fuck that guy. Absolutely. Luke, we've heard a lot of Robert Whittaker sound this week from my interview with him that you can catch on youtube.com/morningcombat, along with Derek Lewis, Chris Colbert, Anthony Pettis, a lot of good stuff there, bonus-wise. But, Luke, we've got sound from Adesanya from Wednesday's media day when he sat in front of reporters in Las Vegas, and he had a very interesting thing to shout out. Let's throw to that.
Yeah, I think he's a good fighter. He's a good fighter, and I think he has gotten better. I'd be lying if I said he hasn't. But, who was I saw on Twitter again. I have a lot of time during fight week, so I'm scrolling a lot. But it was Luke Thomas, yes, Morning Combat. They were saying, pretty much we know this in MMA, we have recency bias. You guys remember from the Y'all fight, oh my God, Israel's so boring. No, he just runs away. And I was like, oh, really? Watch this. So, yeah, they just forget. Rob's
Luke, that's real. Recognizing real. I'm sorry to sit here and boast, Luke, but that's what's up, okay?
Dude, I have a high degree of respect for Israel Adesanya. It's been a joy to cover his career. I mean that quite sincerely. I think he's one of the most unique people we have in the sport. I think it's, when he's gone, I think people will finally appreciate all the stuff that he did. And, this is why I don't really consider myself a journalist. I don't really do journalism per se. I do much more sort of media hype, really, than anything else. But, yeah, dude, it's great to see. I think very highly of the middleweight champion. Very highly.
I got a lot of DMs from, look, we already know the passion for combat sports down under, for MMA, and Australia, New Zealand is through the roof. Look, I got a lot of down under DMs just saying, hey, BC, you bitch, you old bitch. I know you're cheering for Robert Whittaker. I know you're just jealous. You just want to, but hey, all of Australia, New Zealand, your boy BC loves him, some Adesanya, okay? That's why, part of why I love this fight so much, whether I like Whittaker's chances or not. I'm so happy, Luke, that Adesanya, at least in theory, got paid with the announcement, as we mentioned quickly on Wednesday's show, to become, quote unquote, whatever this means, one of the highest paid mixed martial artists in the sport's history. Luke, he talked about it very briefly as a quick aside in Wednesday's press conference of saying, there's going to be a trickle down effect that he's excited about. What does that really mean? Do you think that he's saying maybe because of the Ngannou situation in John Jones and others bringing fighter pay so forcefully to light, at the very least, Adesanya got himself paid, whether you think that's a result of that or not. But it sounded like Adesanya was saying the stars are going to start to be taken care of moving forward. Is that what he's saying, Luke?
Could be that, but I don't think there's any... Listen, the UFC does respond to public pressure. They're very quiet about it. They're very, behind the scenes about it. And listen, they're also resistant to other forms of public pressure. It doesn't always work. But the reality of that lawsuit was, and John Nash made this point recently, when you think about all the various entities that have at least attempted to do something on behalf of the fighters, right, to get more information, more awareness, just to meaningfully improve their situation, you can't really say that the double M, triple A, or the the professional, whatever that thing that Boris tried, all that stuff, didn't really do anything. It didn't. I mean, they tried. Project Spearhead tried. I want to say that they made a good faith effort, of course, but in the end, it was not very successful. What was successful was, and it's not even over, that lawsuit, bringing to light all the documents that we needed to make judgments about fighter pay, but more to the point, they introduced some of the sunset clauses, and some pay went up for some certain guys, and so it is entirely believable to me that Jake Paul, whatever else you think about him, ringing that fighter pay bell, and you can say he's disingenuous about it. Fine, maybe he is. But the fact that he's ringing that bell and everyone else, and Ngannou making these claims about it, I have a strong suspicion that put them in a place where, are the fighters optimizing how much they could get? I'm very skeptical of that. But I am not skeptical that all these things influenced the situation to bring Adesanya more money, and good for him. That's how
they
it
went
should
after
be.
the right guy, by the way. Even if he's 33 years old or 32, whatever, Luke, I mean, this is the right guy globally to build around. And, we remember the Eugene Behrman comments I mentioned on Wednesday, teasing that the UFC hasn't done a great job promoting him like they could have. It was interesting, Izzy on Wednesday did bring up that he felt the announcement of this fight by the UFC was just so ho-hum and thrown out there, and was purposefully done as leverage since he was in the midst of an intense contract negotiation at the time. Luke, they would never do that. That's ridiculous. I mean, come on.
That seems so uncharacteristic of the hardball games they play. Why would they ever do something like that? I mean, again, we don't know. Well, we should be clear. We don't know. We have no idea. We're just speculating.
To see a guy like this get paid. He's a superstar. I think there's so much potential, even more, for his brand to grow. If he beats Robert Whittaker a second time and does it convincingly, damn, let's talk about that. Here are the list of middleweight champions as it stands today, BC. This is the full list of them, right? Like, how many have there been and who are they? Here's the list. These are all the middleweight champions in UFC history. Dave Benet, Murilo Bustamante, Evan Tanner, Rich Franklin, Anderson Silva, Chris Weidman, Luke Rockhold, Michael Bisping, Robert Whittaker, and then he was for the interim title, and then, the whole thing with St. Pierre, then Robert Whittaker got it back or whatever, promoted to undisputed champion, whatever it was. Then Adesanya, and then he had it for interim time, and then this one. So he's had it, if you look at who's had it longer, obviously Silva would be the longest, 2,457 days. Weidman, 889 days, BC. But his wins would include the Anderson Silva win, Machida, and then Belfort for the getting the belt and then defenses. By contrast, Adesanya would have all the wins and then the Romero, Costa, and Vettori fight. I'm going to argue that if he beats Whittaker here, he is at worst, your second best middleweight of all time. At worst. Correct? Yeah, you're correct. You're correct, Luke. I told you when we did this peak pandemic at CBS Sports, when we just started ranking historically the greatest fighters in each UFC division all time, it was a tough debate after Silva at that point to really identify who the number two was, because it was fairly even whether you were a Weidman guy, a Rockhold guy. There were a couple other arguments you could have made coming in, hipster arguments. Is Adesanya already there? God, if he beats Whittaker a second time, he's already there. And by the way, Luke, if Whittaker comes back and avenges his only loss in this weight division and beats Adesanya, it all falls into why this fight's so great, why it's potential for some historic results, and why, Luke, I think, again, at the end of the day, I don't know if either one of these guys ever passes Anderson Silva. I would probably guess not, but I think they're going to fight each other 3 times, and I think we're going to remember Adesanya and Whittaker when it is all said and done as the second and third best middleweights in UFC history or the sports history or whatever. Again, flip-flop based on how this rivalry plays out, but whether that just gave away my prediction or not, I think we're seeing a third one. I love these two. I love what this matchup could bring. It's why I've got a hard-on from here to Hanover, Luke. I am so damn fired up about this fight. Do you have anything else to say, Luke, about what could happen, what might happen?
This is elite MMA doesn't come much better. And just one final note is what I would say to folks, just as a reminder, this is why you want MMA globalized. MMA gets better when you can pull in all the talent from Africa, all the talent from Asia, all the talent from New Zealand, from Australia in this particular case, obviously, and everywhere else. And this is just scratching the surface. They're just scratching the surface of how much unbelievable talent is out there. And this is a great showcase for how much MMA has developed. And it's just a great showcase. If you love elite MMA, you don't get much better than this. What a fight. What a contest. What two guys who brought us to this position. We are lucky, quite lucky, to be living through an era like this.
All right, Luke, it's prediction time. I think you can tell where I'm going. We're going 5 rounds. The public will be split. The judges may even end up being split again. I think both will bring their very best game. You'll see a lot of adjustments. Really, this has the potential to be a great fight. Maybe not fight of the year, but strategically, tactfully, I am dialed in and ready. And I've got Robert Whittaker winning the decision here. And I've heard people say, for all the pump up and the puff up of Rob and making excuses for him, BC, how the hell is he actually going to get in there and beat Adesanya? It's not going to be easy. It's going to have to be a varied attack. You're going to have to make Adesanya come to you. You're going to have to know that you're going to lose at least 2 rounds. I mean, this is going to be X's and O's. I don't see him having monster success on the ground, but I see Whittaker getting a few takedowns and establishing that threat. He's going to have his chin tested, because to go into the fire, he's going to have to land something big to win these rounds, and he's going to get checked. Those counter hooks from Adesanya are deadly. But Luke, we have a reformed man who, when Adesanya really started to become Adesanya, you looked around the roster, and you love to talk yourself into the one-punch potential of a Romero, or, what if this specific fighter could take Adesanya down the whole fight? But we're talking about, a puncher's chance in those cases, a wrestler's chance. We got the real deal, well-rounded, potential all-time great fighter in Whittaker here, and I think he finds a way and gets it done. We haven't seen Adesanya in this competitive of a fight at middleweight in a while, since Gastelum, to be fair. You're going to see it again on Saturday night, and we're going to see a great fight. Give me a majority split either way, Robert Whittaker. Luke, who wins on Saturday?
Wow, that's a bold pick. That's interesting. I would say, and we don't know if this in reference to our conversation on Wednesday, BC, about Pena and Nunes, right? Did you get the very best versions of both of them, and how, it doesn't require a huge difference on the right night for one to surpass the other, assuming one is kind of off and one is kind of on. Listen, Adesanya doesn't have room for error. He does not have room for error. I'll be just as clear about that as I can be. Any error made in this fight, either tactically, strategically, in the moment, whatever, is going to be very costly, and Robert Whittaker will make him pay for it. I am expecting a very, very close fight, but I think A game to A game, if that's what we get, and who the hell knows, I think Israel Adesanya is too talented. I think that he'll be able, for the most part, to bring the portions of his offense that matter to life enough to win 3 rounds, and I think he probably stops Whittaker inside the distance. But I'll say this: the fight going the distance would be of zero surprise. I mean, that I think he gets it done inside the distance, but if it went, whatever. But I think in general, Adesanya, the better fighter, he should win.
Luke, is the public and the media overplaying how much Whittaker may or may not have been compromised the first time?
No, I don't think they were overplaying it. Here's the thing. Again, it's the Hughes GSP thing. Hughes won the first time, so the comparison doesn't work. But when they met up the second time, you're just looking and you're like, okay, Hughes is formidable, but like, what's he better at than St. Pierre? You just didn't know what it was. It's not the case here. It's not, dude. It's not. He has shown you through 3 tough ass fights, 3 very, very good fighters, that he can make the kinds of changes that make his game better. It's just a fact. And so unless he commits another cataclysmic strategic error, BC, which I'm just not expecting at all, he's way too smart, way too seasoned, you are getting a different fighter. It's not the same guy. You just have to respect that, whether you think he's going to win or lose. And I definitely respect that.
They haven't made a lot of humans on this earth, Luke, who could go 10 full rounds against a prime Yoel Romero and come out with his hand raised twice, whether disputed or not. It may have cost him 3 years of his career, to be fair, in terms of, he sat out a year after the first Romero fight, almost a year after the second one. Then he pulled out of 2 fights. He's all effed up. Then he gets knocked out. He may have lost 3 years to his career, but Bobby Knuckles is still that guy. And if you believe he is, you believe he's got a chance. But your prediction, Adesanya winning by stoppage, boy, is that in play as well, because we saw it the first time around, and he is that great. Love this fight, Luke. Damn.
It's you know what? It should be, this. I'm as excited for this as maybe even more so, because I would actually say this is much more uncertain even than Canelo versus Plant. But even then, you were like, damn, I'm not sure exactly how this is going to go, right? Like there was a lot of reasons not to think that Plant could win in the same way, but how was Canelo going to solve the puzzle? And that to me was very intriguing. In this case, it's like, how is Whittaker going to solve that puzzle? And if he does present a new puzzle, how is Adesanya going to solve it? It's just competitive in the best of ways. 2 guys, dude, what are you going to say? 2 guys in their prime, 2 proven champions, 2 battle-tested champions who aren't over the hill. If you're an MMA fan, dude, what is it that you want? You want this every time. This is what you're waiting for. This is the stuff. You sit through all the rest of that bullshit so you can get these 2. That's what you're waiting for, motherfucker.
This is why you lift them weights in the offseason.
This is filet mignon. Fucking enjoy.
Is this the best pure fight on paper, not necessarily taking commercialism into it, since Khabib versus Conor? Or was Holloway Volkanovski that? Or hey, BC, shut up, just enjoy the fight. It's.
I'll just put it this way. I don't know exactly how I would rank it, but I'm being dead serious when I say it. I don't know how exciting the fight's going to be. All the promoter do is can give you the fights that matter, that you want to see, that are important for the sport. They have done that here. You have it. On paper, MMA fights simply don't get better. They just don't. So that doesn't mean that the fight will be exciting, but for everything that a fan could ask for in a matchup, it checks the boxes times 1,000.